Okay. So, okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Natural Sciences Lecture Series with the Friends of San Pedro Valley Park. I'm doing this again because I have put the record button on. I'm Mila Stroganoff, Programs Director and host for this evening's webinar. I hope everyone is well and looking forward to tonight's program. Dr. Emily Taylor is joining us and will introduce us to the world of snakes. And I will introduce Emily in just a minute. To recap this year's fall programming, the Friends of San Pedro Valley Park completed a 2-week course entitled Birding 101, led by J.R. Blair, which was followed by a fascinating lecture on great white sharks in September and a raptor rescue lecture in October. We have an excellent selection of lectures recorded that can be found on the website, on the Friends website, including the ones I just mentioned. Do take time to enjoy them. The website is friendsofsanpedrovalleypark.org. I'm also pleased to inform everyone that this lecture will be recorded and posted within a couple of weeks. And usually our IT guru gets it up there quite much sooner than that. So if you or friends wish to view it again, please do so. As is my norm, I give a heads up to all attendees regarding the upcoming lecture. December will be dark as regards lectures, but we will have a mycoblitz led by J.R. Blair in the park. Mushrooms collected will be displayed at the San Francisco Mycological Society's Fungus Fair the following day. The mycoblitz takes place on the first Saturday in December. Registration is required and space is limited. Then on Saturday, January 25th at 7 p.m., Tanya Baxter presents a lecture on the flora of the Northern Sierra. Tonight's lecture will follow the same pattern as previous ones with a Q&A at the end. Please write questions and comments into the Q&A section. That way we'll have everything in one place, and do avoid the chat. It is disabled. And now to our speaker. I am thrilled that Dr. Emily Taylor has agreed to present tonight. Allow me to introduce her. Emily Taylor is a professor of biological sciences at the California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California, where she conducts research on the physiology, ecology, and conservation biology of lizards and snakes with her students. She has a bachelor's degree in English at UC Berkeley and Ph.D. in biology at Arizona State University. California Snakes and How to Find Them is her first popular science book, though she has been a biology textbook author for many years. Self-described as obsessed with snakes, Emily is a staunch advocate for improving the public image of snakes, especially rattlesnakes. She founded a community science program called Project Rattlecam, where members of the public help her and other scientists learn about rattlesnakes by analyzing photos and live stream footage from snake dens. Rattlecam.org it is. She also founded a company, Central Coast Snake Services, aimed at helping people and snakes in California coexist safely and peacefully. And that's centralcoastsnakeservices.com. And so, Emily, take it away. Thanks.
Okay, let's share. How's that look? Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Mila, for inviting me. Any chance I have to talk about snakes to a captive audience, I'm thrilled to do so. Tonight, I'm going to be kind of whisking you away into the wonderful world of California snakes. I published my first book in May of this year called California Snakes and How to Find Them. Kind of like a field guide, but mostly just wonderful stories and photographs about snakes meant to demystify them and introduce people to what I call the new bird watching, snake hunting. And so I'm going to be reading some excerpts from the book and telling you some stories about snakes, and then transitioning into a little more focus on rattlesnakes and how we spy on them with secret cameras to learn more about their interesting lives. Okay, first of all, let's acknowledge that snakes are not popular among most people. And that's true even among some scientists now, and some of our early scientists, including Carl Linnaeus, the person who came up with binomial nomenclature, the genus and species way of naming organisms, where he called them foul and loathsome beasts, basically. You know, you can see all these terms in red: abhorrent, filthy, fierce, calculating, offensive, squalid habitation, terrible venom. And I love what he says here. And so their creator has not exerted his powers to make very many of them. Well, I personally believe that, Linnaeus was spending a little bit too much time in Northern Europe, because if he had been around the world following his own logic here, that in natural science the principles of truth ought to be confirmed by observation, he would know, in fact, that there are many, many species of snakes. Snakes inhabit every continent, of course, except for Antarctica. They're highly, highly diverse, and they're extremely diverse in California, too. So how diverse are they? Well, there's been a lot of snakes described even just in the past 20 years or so. So right now there's a little over 4,100 species of snakes that have been described worldwide, and that's up like a whole thousand from 2008. So people have been actively describing snakes. This is both, snakes that have never been seen before. Someone finds them in a remote jungle, and also, DNA analysis is allowing us to split what we thought was one species into additional species. Well, the really cool thing about this is that worldwide of, more than 4,000 species of snakes, in California, we have quite a few. We actually have more than our fair share based on the area of the state. So there's nearly 50 species of snakes in California. And, California, basically based on its landmass, you would expect it to have many fewer, but it has that many, probably because of what makes California wildlife in general so diverse. It's a huge state. It spans multiple latitudes. We have many, many different habitat types, and we have vast areas of undisturbed, undeveloped land where these animals can live and thrive peacefully. They're from 5 different families, representing a diversity of snake evolutionary history. And like I said before, they are really present from the coast to the deserts. I like to say that every inch of California is occupied by snakes, except for maybe some of the dense urban centers. Other than that, there's snakes there. And so I saw a void out there in popular science books about snakes. There weren't really any books about California snakes, especially about how to go look for them in the wild. And so I wrote this book, and it was published by Heyday Books up there in Berkeley, California, back in May. It's been really fun. I've been able to give presentations similar to this in person at like the California Academy of Sciences this year, the San Diego Natural History Museum, and many other places, especially when the book first came out. And it's been really wonderful to connect with people like you who want to learn about snakes. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. So people often ask me, why snakes? Why was it snakes that really captivated my imagination? And you're going to hear a bunch of answers to that tonight. Um, and you know, I think that there's a lot of reasons why people are captivated by snakes. I was saying earlier, if you were here when we were chatting at the very beginning before we officially started, that there's very few people out there who don't have an opinion about snakes. No one's ambivalent about snakes. Sure, snake phobia is the most common phobia, and most people in the world fear or hate snakes. But then there's a huge group of people who love snakes, and those who love them fiercely. And there's reasons for that. I mean, look at this incredible animal here. Beauty is one of the things that draws me to snakes. So this little icon that just popped up on the right on the top is a reminder to me to read an excerpt from my book. So I'm going to be doing that just a few times tonight so that you can hear kind of, why I wrote this book and what the book is like. Again, you'll see that it's not technical science. It's written for a public audience. I don't know if you can see it with my blurry background, but there it is. All right. So this is from the preface to the book where I talked about, why I wrote a book about snakes. This book is for snake lovers and snake lovers to be. Few animals capture our imaginations like snakes do, but their reputations are as forked as their tongues. For many people, snakes are scary, gross, and even considered bad omens. For others like me, snakes represent grace, beauty, and resilience. They are just as fantastic as any beast that Harry Potter encounters in the wizarding world. I may be just about as Slytherin as they come, but there will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this book. Learning about California snakes and how to find them requires practice, persistence, and luck. In this book, I coach you on what you need to develop snake hunting skills and cheerlead you on being persistent enough to find the snakes that you seek. My love affair with snakes began 25 years ago on a class field trip in college with my herpetology professor when he handed me a California king snake that he had found under a log. My vision went dark around the edges as I stared, mesmerized, at the shiny black and white coils of muscle riding in my hands. From then on, it was a rare log, rock, or piece of tin I passed without looking underneath it. I was hooked. I now spend much of my time spreading the good word about California snakes in every way I can by teaching my own herpetology students, unlocking the secrets of snakes in my research at Cal Poly, promoting ways to live safely in areas with rattlesnakes, and sharing snake stories wherever I go. So to begin answering this question about why snakes, the first reason is simple. Snakes are beautiful. Consider this incredible animal. This is a California red-sided garter snake from not too terribly far from you. Interestingly, it's commonly confused with the San Francisco garter snake, which is very, very close to you, but it is slightly different. So the California red-sided garter snake on the left, that was actually taken up in Marin County, where I went to high school at Novato High School back in the day. In contrast, the very similar, related, so same species, different subspecies that you have, that is the rarest snake in California, just right near you, just a few populations remaining, is the San Francisco garter snake. And the best way to tell them apart, usually, is that the red stripe along the sides of the San Francisco garter snake is a true stripe. They connect. Whereas in the California red-sided garter snake, you have blotches. But of course, honestly, the best way is where you are, right? If you're down in the peninsula, south of San Francisco, and you're in certain parks and areas, you may be lucky enough to see a highly endangered San Francisco garter snake. But beauty doesn't have to be just colors. Snakes can be beautiful even if they are, black, like this, or brown, or, drab colored. And it's this beauty that is allowing them to blend into the environment and to be camouflaged. The photographs in this book were taken by various colleagues of mine. I'm a terrible photographer, so I am honored that they allowed me to use their photographs. And the photographs do a really good job of showing these snakes in a light that maybe our eyes even wouldn't be able to see. Part of that is by macro photography. This Western black-headed snake is tiny. They're about the size of a pencil. And through macro photography, we're able to see up close the intricate scales and the patterns of this beautiful little snake. It's kind of rare to see these snakes, mainly because they mostly live underground, terrorizing scorpions and centipedes and other animals that they like to eat. Fascinatingly, these Western black-headed snakes and several other species of non-rattlesnakes in California are technically venomous. They produce a venom in venom glands in their upper jaws that are released via fangs in the back of their mouth, and they kill things like the scorpions that they eat. However, that venom is completely harmless to humans, and so we don't typically call them venomous. They're not dangerous to humans, but technically they do have venom. Or consider this also a really small snake, the coast night snake. If you see this snake up close, you can see not only the intricate patterns of speckling on their scales, but that beautiful gold and copper colored eye with that vertical pupil that gives this snake its name, the night snake. Even though this snake actually may be active, mostly underneath objects, but active during the day. So color is, one of the major things that people do love, and rattlesnakes can be camouflaged and cryptic, or they can be incredible. Like I like to call this a Halloween snake, even though that's not a technical name. This is just one of many color patterns in the southwestern speckled rattlesnake, which is found down in our southeastern deserts. These snakes are rock dwelling, and so they tend to match the colors of the rocks that they live in. And this one is from kind of a more lava rocks that have orange lichens on them. And it's not because they're changing colors, it's because through natural selection, millions of years of blending in and not being eaten by birds, these animals have come to resemble the colors of the rocks they live in. So you can find them in white, bluish, reddish, almost pure black, lots of things in between. Truly amazing snakes. And then bringing us back to another really colorful snake, another small snake, in fact, and a shy snake in California, the ringneck snake. These snakes are not uncommon up where you are. Um, they tend to be more common in areas in Northern California, or more commonly seen at least, than they are down where I live. And these have this beautiful coloration, possibly for a reason. So you can see that underneath this snake, and also in just the ring on its neck that gives it its name, this ringneck snake has this incredibly gorgeous orangish red color. And when you see that color in nature, it oftentimes means something. And I'm going to read to you from the species account for the ringneck snake. So in my book, each snake in California has its own species account, and it's sort of like a field guide in that it talks about the appearance of the snake and where you can find it, etc. But it's not highly technical. We're not talking like about how many scales it has in its lips. We're just giving you a broad overview. And mostly we focus on interesting stories about these snakes. Okay. This excerpt is from a section that I have in each species account that's called You Might Like to Know, where I talk about fascinating natural history information about each species. No discussion of ringneck snakes would be complete without acknowledging the charming posture that they adopt when they are defensive. If you're lucky enough to find a ringneck snake under a log, and if you then disturb it, it will immediately curl up its tail into an ornate coil and flash you with its bright orange-red undersides. The color red is often used by animals to signal a warning to would-be predators. In particular, it can often indicate that the prey is poisonous or unpalatable. Some animals ride on the coattails of these trailblazers by showing off a red warning display, even though they're not actually toxic. This is known as mimicry. So which is the ringneck snake? Well, it definitely isn't toxic to eat. It does have venom, another example of a venomous snake that's not harmful to humans. That said, it appears the ringneck snake is mainly a mimic, a bluffer that shows off its red belly despite being harmless to a predator. However, the odor of the musk that these snakes so readily exude as they coil up defensively is possibly bad enough to count as toxic if you have a sense of humor and of smell. While among the stinkiest of all California snakes, these little bluffers more than make up for it in charm. So that takes us into the next reason that I love snakes. It's because snakes live in beautiful places. This is a little bit of a cop-out because they live everywhere in California, but hunting for snakes out in the wild can take you to areas that you might not ordinarily go. Indeed, you can find snakes everywhere from our coastal beaches and sand dunes. This rattlesnake we found curled up in a popular, highly trafficked by humans cove down here in San Luis Obispo County. On into our grasslands, through the Central Valley in areas that are not taken by oil exploration and agriculture, on up into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, indeed, up to some of the highest reaches of the Sierra Nevada, the highest several thousand feet. There's no snakes, but they get up there into above 11,000 feet in many places. And then in our southeastern part of the state into the incredible Mojave Desert, which is one of my favorite places in the world. This photo was taken back in May by photographer Marissa Ishimatsu, who took many of the photos of my book. If you look really carefully, you'll see two figures over here on the right-hand side, off in the distance. That's my graduate student, Owen, and I. We went for an early morning stroll. We knew we were going to make it to the top of that sand dune. Well, it's a lot steeper than it looks, and you can see us sitting there where we finally gave up and decided to kind of crawl tired back to our group and go snake hunting. And in these deserts, you can see some truly amazing animals, like this sidewinder rattlesnake that is extremely camouflaged with its environment, and it curls up and sits in the sand to ambush lizards that walk by. So Marissa took this photo, like many of the photos that she takes and many of the photos in my book, the photos are in situ, meaning that the snake, it shows the snake as it was found, undisturbed, not posed by the photographer. And this little sidewinder was sitting there, and instead of, catching the sidewinder and poking it and prodding it to take photos, she photographed it beautifully and left it alone. And that leads me to another theme of my book, which is that, yeah, I mean, it can be nice to catch snakes, not rattlesnakes, other snakes sometimes. And I'll talk about that later on. But leaving snakes alone to watch them can really be interesting. And sure enough, she came back to observe this sidewinder a little bit later, and this mound behind it of sand is where a desert iguana had dug itself into the sand. And when it came out for the morning, it became breakfast to this patient ambush hunting sidewinder. So, another reason that I really like snakes is because they're a challenge. Like I said in the introduction, snake hunting is the new bird watching. And just like with birds, some birds are easy to find, and some of them you really have to work for it, including this western thread snake, which is absolutely adorable. Look at this tiny little snake. It's one of California's smallest snakes. It's smaller than the size of a pencil. It has vestigial eyes, meaning that they're evolutionary vestiges of times past. They're kind of just little spots of light sensing cells underneath its skin. And that's mostly because it lives underground. And if you're lucky enough to see one above ground, that's why they're hard to find. They're incredibly gorgeous. Look at this little animal. You might think it was an earthworm, but if you look closely, you see those telltale scales that make it a snake. And indeed, this snake has a really fascinating natural history story that I'm going to share with you from its species account. Thread snakes are the subject of one of the most wild and wacky natural history stories of all time. Owls sometimes capture thread snakes and bring them to their nests. Typically, owls kill prey before feeding them to their chicks, but they drop the thread snakes into the nests alive, where the snakes are not usually eaten by the chicks, but rather burrow into the nest material and take up residence within, feeding upon the insects that are attracted to the bits of rotting flesh left over from other meals fed to the messy chicks. The owl-thread snake relationship is allegedly one of mutualism, where the snakes benefit by getting food, and the owls benefit by having personal exterminators that keep insects at bay. One study even found that the owl chicks in nests with thread snakes grew faster and were more likely to survive than those in nests without these snakes. That's the first of a couple stories of birds that you're going to hear about tonight. So on the other end of the spectrum, some are very easy to find. At certain times in California, gopher snakes are extremely, extremely common. And just like many common organisms, sometimes they're overlooked because they're so common. But I would say that gopher snakes are incredible when you look at them up close, and they're also incredible for how common they are. Gopher snakes play many, many roles in California due to their sheer abundance. They're named gopher snakes, partly because they eat gophers and other rodents, partly because they live underground in rodent burrows. But considering a world without gopher snakes, we would be absolutely overrun by rodents, just like it would be true with a world without rattlesnakes. And so gopher snakes are another one of these organisms that I would like to read to you from an excerpt from the book, because even though people like to find rare organisms, there are incredible stories about these gopher snakes too. Here's another story about a bird and a snake. Gopher snakes are among the best climbers of California snakes. They can easily climb trees, scale fences, and even climb up the outside of houses that have textured surfaces like stucco or brick. This skill is central to their notoriety as bird nest raiders. On a camping trip with my students in the Carrizo Plain, we watched a large gopher snake crawl across the campground and climb about 30 feet up a huge tree. As it reached the top, two large birds emerged and started dive bombing the snake. It was a pair of great horned owls defending their nest. The gopher snake completely ignored them and disappeared right into the nest. We couldn't see what the snake was doing, but the owl parents' distress as they tried to scare the snake away was a good hint. About 40 minutes later, the snake emerged from the nest and crawled back down the tree the same way it had gone up, this time with two large lumps in its belly. In an amazing demonstration of predatory prowess, that snake had crawled straight to that nest. It somehow knew it was there. Now, owls regularly feed on gopher snakes, grasping and tearing them with their huge talons. Why didn't the owls just try to catch and kill the gopher snake this time, a move that could have resulted in them feeding the snake to their chicks instead of the reverse? I don't know. One thing I do know for sure, when my students first saw that gopher snake crawling across the campground, their natural urge was to run over and pick up the snake to admire it. Instead, we decided to watch the snake to see what it would do. No matter whether you're on Team Owl or Team Snake, the power of observational experiences to connect us deeply to wild creatures in their natural element cannot be overstated. Leave snakes alone and watch them. You'll never know what you will see. Now, I told you that in the book, I also try to balance that against the idea that in some circumstances, picking up and holding a snake and looking at it up close can be incredibly valuable in connecting us to nature. This captive gopher snake that has lived at Cal Poly for longer than I have, named Milo, has been held by thousands and thousands of kids in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, probably single-handedly contributing to a reduction in snake phobias by these kids. Holding snakes when you're a kid or even when you're an adult can be really formative in creating that connection with nature. They're highly holdable animals, whereas bird watching, you don't typically get to get your hands on them. And so in the book, I talk about taking a measured approach, and if you are going to hold them, how to do so safely. This is my favorite photo from the book. It's the first photo at the beginning of the preface. This is young Darius showing off a California king snake that he caught. And I was really thrilled when I sent Darius's father a copy of the book for Darius, as well as a limited edition t-shirt. And Darius's father sent back this photo with permission to show it to everyone, showing young Darius proudly showing off his photo in the book. Now, I think this could be the making of a future herpetologist. So now I'd like to transition into the next part of the talk, which is the allure of rattlesnakes. There are 7 species of rattlesnakes in California, or 9, depending on whether you consider certain forms to be subspecies or species. I consider them to be 7. And in the book, I have species accounts of all of them, and I go through why they are so alluring to me. It can be things like how they can live in really harsh environments and survive due to their low metabolic rates and their ability to live really dehydrated until the next rainfall. It can be that they even can survive in areas with high degrees of urbanization, like this red diamond rattlesnake that only lives down in the very, very southern part of California, and then, of course, into northern Baja California. And this species is actually a species of special concern designated by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that's because most of its range has been turned into houses. It lives in San Diego, Orange, and Riverside counties primarily. However, it still persists. If you ever drive through Riverside County and you see that there's just oceans of homes surrounding these rocky peaks that pop up here and there, those rocky peaks are full of red diamond rattlesnakes, which easily get to 4 feet plus. It can be, as I said before, the ability to blend into the environment through natural selection, like this Panamint rattlesnake, which is a close cousin, a very close related snake to the southwestern speckled rattlesnake. It comes in just all shapes and colors. And then it's also a number of aspects about the ability to survive in the face of adversity. Like the western rattlesnake, which is the species of rattlesnake that you have there in the Bay Area. It's also known there as the northern Pacific rattlesnake, which is a subspecies of the western rattlesnake. And this one holds a particular place in my heart. And this will be the last excerpt that I read from the book before talking a little bit more about rattlesnakes, which are my favorite. And I wanted to explain why these rattlesnakes are so important to me. Choosing a favorite snake for me is like asking a parent to pick a favorite child. Nearly impossible. The expected answer might be the most striking, beautiful snake, and on some days, sinuous snake beauty is indeed the most compelling draw for me. However, as a biologist, I have a more nuanced view of what it is to like or indeed to love wildlife. Beauty matters, sure, but more important is the feeling I have when I encounter a snake in the wild. It's the thrill of the hunt and the greater thrill of finding a snake. It is watching their interesting behaviors, which I might have missed if I had interfered with them by prodding or capturing them. It is their success in persisting in high numbers, even in areas where people persecute them. And this braid of connection is strongest for me with the western rattlesnake, which I confess is my absolute favorite snake. I have uncovered hundreds under tin boards at junk piles. I have radio tracked hundreds with my students over the years, getting a chance to peer into their private lives for months or even years. I have rescued hundreds from yards where, if not for me, animal control officers or homeowners might have beheaded them with shovels just for daring to exist. With familiarity comes understanding and affection. The western rattlesnake, like other rattlesnakes, is unfairly vilified and sensationalized by nearly everyone. The truth is that this species, which is notable in California because its wide range and high density, means that it is the rattlesnake species that most often comes into contact with people. It's actually a gentle snake that wants nothing to do with us. In fact, it does us a great service by controlling rodent populations that, if left unchecked, would denude our plants, eat our crops, and spread disease. Western rattlesnakes can live for decades, have complex social lives, complete with friends and family members, give birth to live pups that they protect from predators during the vulnerable period during their first shed. The sheer volume of my experience with these beautiful snakes has bred in me a strong affection and an urgent need to share what I know about living peacefully with Western rattlesnakes. So I hope y'all are ready to hear more about rattlesnakes because I have some stories to tell you about some of the research that we're doing now with my students at Cal Poly. So you have to kind of, you know, your brain has to adjust to this photo a little bit to see what you're seeing. Count the heads, right? There's actually 3 adult rattlesnakes here, 1 head, 2 head, 3, and a little pile of brand new baby rattlesnakes born within the last day or 2. These are prairie rattlesnakes from Colorado, but they live in something that's called a mega den, which is a den of many dozens or hundreds of individuals. Big dens like that are rare in California because in California we have a mild enough climate that, they don't have to all migrate to the one area that provides the right, hiding places to get under the frost line. But in Colorado, they do. And we've been lucky enough to study these individuals with some really new emerging technology and learn lots of things about them. This is all part of what's called Project RattleCam, where we have basically created a system where community scientists like you can help us watch these rattlesnakes in real time, as you're going to hear, and learn about them. And simultaneously, it helps to dispel these myths about rattlesnakes. Now, rattlesnakes are vilified and sensationalized, like I said, on TV, by the media, on YouTube. And when you actually go and find rattlesnakes in the wild, they're scared of you. They're rattle. They're acting scared. This is a pile of prairie rattlesnakes at a mega den in Colorado. The colored rattles there are because we did a study catching them and marking them with unique colors, so we knew who they were. But the next part I want to talk about is a subsequent study we did at a different mega den where we wanted to avoid impacting their behavior. We don't want them to be defensive and scary. We want to see what they really do when people aren't there disturbing them. And to do that, we installed the first ever live streaming camera on a rattlesnake den. So many of you are probably familiar, like I was, with live streaming cameras on bird nests, where you get to watch the parent peregrine falcons bring food to the chicks. Well, a lot of those are on buildings, like the famous Cal Falcon Cam at my alma mater, UC Berkeley, where they have the luxury of plugging those cameras into Wi-Fi and to power. Well, this camera is in a truly remote area, and so this required the work of 3 engineers, which I luckily have access to at a Polytechnic University, creating a completely from scratch system using the top of the line live streaming camera here. It's a security camera that has remote pan, tilt, and zoom. So from anywhere in the world, I can, on my laptop, control this camera, zoom in, pan around, see a little snake, I can zoom in on it. And very importantly, this is live streamed to YouTube 24 hours a day. And what makes this really different, aside from it being on snakes, from most of these live streams, is that there was a live chat that was heavily monitored as well. So for 12 hours a day for the past 5 months plus, I had a team of trained students that would be on shifts to answer questions in the live chat. And this is very important for us because the whole point of this is to learn about snakes and to teach people that snakes aren't these terrible, horrifying beasts that the media makes them out to be. And so by answering questions, people were able to spread education about rattlesnakes. This was a lot of effort and training to keep that live stream going that long. And I'm really proud of my students for doing a good job. So what you're looking at is the live streaming camera in the center pointing down at this den of rattlesnakes. And in the background is a weather station recording all of the details of the weather right at that site for my students' research. So we did a lot of science with this webcam where I have students studying the social behavior of the snakes, the thermoregulatory behavior of the snakes. 2 graduate students, Owen and Max, are getting all their data for their master's degree this summer on that live cam. But tonight I'm going to show you some clips about some of the highlights of things that we learned when we actually watch snakes when they don't know we're there. First of all, look at the incredible quality of these cameras. This is not like a blurry old security camera. This this image was taken, think of it, like 1,100 miles away. I'm sitting in my office at Cal Poly controlling this, and this is a zoom in of a big pile of female rattlesnakes. These are all pregnant female rattlesnakes. And as you watch them interacting, I want to tell you why they're all there. So this is a rattlesnake den. Oh, first of all, I want to just point out, watch this snake who's kind of twitching all over the back of the other snake. Just watch that for a minute as I talk. Okay, this is a den of rattlesnakes. They're underground, deep underneath the frost line all winter long. And in the spring, they come out, and for about a month, for all of May, all the snakes, the females, the males, last year's babies, they'll all bask during the day in the sun, go underground at night. And then, come beginning of June, all the snakes, the male snakes, the females who aren't pregnant, the little babies, they're all going to leave and they're going to go down into the prairie, sometimes for miles around, to hunt, to mate, to do their thing. But the pregnant females stay behind. They only give birth every 2 or 3 years, so some of them are pregnant, some of them aren't. The pregnant females stay behind and they all bask together all day long. They interact, they have incredible social behaviors. Like I said, they have friends that they prefer to hang out with, certain individuals. They communicate with one another via these tactile cues and those little head jerking motions. And then in August, the snakes will give birth. I'll show you some footage of that later because it turns out that we got the first ever footage of a wild rattlesnake giving birth. And we watched it live on YouTube with hundreds of people. It was incredible. And then they'll care for their babies and protect them from predators for a while. And finally, later in the summer, the males and the other females will come back. Everybody comes back and they all bask for a while before in early November. So just recently, they all go underground to hibernate again. So at rattlecam.org is where you can watch more of this. We also have a California cam. Both of those are now closed for the season because the snakes are no longer active, but they will be up again next year. So I'm going to keep showing you more of these clips. Watch this clip. It is about to turn to nighttime. And the camera, when it senses low light, automatically is going to switch to infrared. So we are zoomed in now on a wild rattlesnake at sunset at 9 p.m. here in the middle of July. And so these snakes would pack themselves into this crevice and we were able to watch them all night long. And we discovered things like these little flies right here. This is looping again. You can see this fly sitting on the snake, which a fly specialist identified as a cycodid fly, which is a blood-sucking fly. But then he said those are mostly male flies. There was like a dance party with all these male flies all over the snakes at night. And the male flies don't drink blood. They sit there waiting for the female flies to show up. And the female flies eventually showed up, took blood meals from the rattlesnakes, and the males all pounced on them to mate. What was really cool about this is that these flies have been studied extensively by scientists who go out, they put fly traps out, they catch the flies, they take them into the lab, but they never knew what they fed on in the wild. And now they have their answer, or at least one of their answers. They may feed on other things. So these types of technologies, like live streaming cameras, like these, can just answer questions that we didn't even know we had. Okay, this is going to be crazy. This was one of the first times that we actually saw a rattlesnake giving birth at night. So this is one where I ended up kind of cutting it and clipping it together, and I put some subtitles over it. So let's watch it together. This is all sped up just a little bit too. So the baby comes out inside an amniotic sac. And here comes another one coming out. And the babies are attached to the mother via an umbilical cord and a placenta, just like humans are. And it's been getting oxygen from its mother for, all summer long during gestation. And when the umbilical cord ruptures, the baby's going to need to take its first breath. Incidentally, as the mother's giving birth, these cave crickets would come up and eat the afterbirth, the umbilical cord, some of the fluids that would come out of the snakes, which is pretty amazing. Now, what I want you to see is as this baby is born, we're going to see one of them poke its head through the amniotic sac right here in the middle and take its first breath. So again, I want you to imagine watching this live at 10 o'clock at night with people from around the world, all just gasping and exclaiming. When people watch a live cam, they feel like they're a part of it because it's happening in the moment. So she wasn't done giving birth. She moved and gave us the best possible view of a wild rattlesnake giving birth. And this one was really interesting because unlike the other ones that poked out of their umbilical, out of their amniotic sac right away, this one kind of sat there as cave crickets came up and they were investigating and eating that amniotic sac. But baby was still attached to the umbilical cord. So, it's still getting oxygen. But then the umbilical cord ruptured, the mom went away, and the baby sat there. So we've now zoomed out. Here's the baby. And hours passed, and it did not come out of its amniotic sac. So people were watching and they were horrified that it was a stillborn. But after 2 hours, mom's giving birth in the back. Look, the baby moves. So literally everyone was watching this. This is now 12:30 a.m. and they're just cheering. They named the baby Lazarus because it rose from the dead. And they also hypothesized that the cave crickets, by coming and eating the amniotic sac, actually helped that baby rattlesnake be born. They called the cave crickets midwives and doulas after that. Um, so I showed you earlier about how the snakes seem to kind of twitch on each other. Well, people have known for a long time that a male rattlesnake who's interested in a female will rub his head all over her in this jerking fashion. And we did see a lot of that when males were present. But when just females were present, we saw a lot of a different sort of behavior that I had never seen before. Oops, I haven't pressed go. So here's a female rattlesnake sitting and hanging out. And I want you to see what happens when this baby approaches. Now she's still pregnant. This is not her baby. Watch her with her little head jerking. We think we have uncovered a secret form of communication among the snakes that they don't do when scientists are there watching them. But they don't know they're being watched, so they did it all the time. Adult females did it to females, males did it, babies do it too. It turns out that the babies did it from birth. Now watch this. This is funny. Sometimes I feel that way about kids too. So, pretty amazing stuff. And we saw this over and over and over. We witnessed incredible things. These snakes that stay on top of this hill, the only water they have access to is rainwater. And we learned that baby rattlesnakes are born with the instinct when it starts to rain to curl up and drink rainwater off their backs. Watch how its body flattens. Whoosh! That's in real time. That's not sped up. Flattens down there to collect the rainwater that catches in its coil. So it basically makes itself into a little teacup. We've known that adult rattlesnakes do this. Many people have described that, but we didn't know that baby rattlesnakes would be born thirsty, essentially, in this extremely dry area, and that they would do that. Now, as is the case in high elevation Colorado, rain can oftentimes quickly turn into hail, as we see. And this little baby is about to get more than it bargained for. Bargained. So there, look at it just chugging that water. Now watch. Oh, it gets hit in the head by a hailstone. And that causes it to crawl away underground. So you can see how we can follow individual snakes around with that camera. And what's amazing about that is that someone can ask us, like, hey, zoom in there. All right, so if you guys were upset by the the owl and the gopher snake earlier, now you're going to see revenge. So this is when we learned what some of the predators are. The snakes in the back are terrified of that black-billed magpie showing up, and for good reason, because look what he does. Amazing. So we learned there that apparently these magpies love to eat from this, smorgasbord of little noodles, and they grab the baby rattlesnakes by the head so they don't get bitten and take off and probably rip their little heads off and then eat them. All right. So another thing that we discovered, this is just the same one looping, by the way. Another thing that we discovered is that rattlesnakes share this den with Western terrestrial garter snakes. And in the spring, when there's a bunch of garter snakes and rattlesnakes together, the garter snakes get really randy and they form these big piles where the males are trying to mate with the females. And sometimes the rattlesnakes will get caught in the middle, and it was hilarious. So mostly we just put clips of natural things happening on our YouTube channel. But for this one, we decided to do a voiceover because it's just too hilarious. So listen to this.
All right, you guys, listen up. This is not a place for you. This is not for you. Get your tail out of my face. This is not a place for you. This is a place for rattlesnakes. Look over here. These are rattles. You don't have them. You don't belong. Stop that. Get your tail off of me. Stop. God, garter snakes. You're choking me. Stop it. Stop. Get off of me. Oh, stop it. Stop. Okay. You don't. Oh. 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 I hate garter snakes. Oh, I'm out. I'm out. This is nonsense. Oh, don't respect. I'm 4 times your size. This is nonsense. I could totally bite you. I got venom. I got real venom, not that rear fang crap that you have. Oh, no, don't go up there. Don't. They're animals. Those guys are complete jerks. Oh, I hate garter snakes. They're the worst. Hate them.
Okay. So that was my husband, a very talented voiceover actor. We thought it was pretty hilarious. People love that video. So we like to have fun with it a little bit too. So there's a ton more clips where that came from. I encourage you all to go to rattlecam.org. You can find clips there. You can find so much more too. If you follow our YouTube channel, we're going to continue posting clips over the winter. In April 2025, the Rattlecam will come back online again in Colorado and then later in California. And then very exciting news is we just announced that we are going to be installing in 2026 another Rattlecam on a timber rattlesnake den in Pennsylvania, which is going to be incredible because they're just such gorgeous animals. And so through all this, again, we hope to not only do research so that we can learn things that we wouldn't see if we were there in person, but also to have an excuse to be able to watch rattlesnakes all the time. But really, it is to demystify rattlesnakes. We had hundreds and hundreds of people watching this live stream. We had tons of media coverage that introduced people to this. And so many people said specifically that they were scared of snakes until they watched this rattle cam, and now they respect them, right? Of course, they don't want to go up and cuddle them, nor should they, but they see that they're actually gentle animals. They loved watching the mother rattlesnakes protect and care for their young. They loved watching them drink. They loved watching them, some of the snakes interact. So it's a community science program, and people were able to, using the unique blotching patterns on the back of the snakes, identify individual snakes, and they could name them if they were able to take several screenshots of them. And if they named them, they got to adopt that rattlesnake, and we sent them a adoption certificate, etc. So we named over 20 different snakes. We're able to watch them from day to day. And when people watch individual snakes, you see that they have personalities, and that really breaks down barriers and makes people think of them with more affection and greater respect. So all the acknowledgments of all of these projects here, I want to acknowledge my main collaborator, Scott Boback. He's at Dickinson College in Pennsylvania. All my students and the funding sources, which I am proud to note is almost exclusively from donors. So this is the Project Rattlecam, which is a community science project, is funded for people, and it's made for people. It's funded by people, excuse me, and made for people. And so we are really proud of that, and we continue to do fundraising. So before I forget to mention it, if you're interested in any cool swag, including a Project Rattlecam calendar, we have it on our website available now, and we're almost out of them. So you should get them now if you want one. That's at rattlecam.org. Click shop. And we now have a situation where anything on that shop through this whole month of November is going to be tripled by a donor and donated back to our research account, which goes to things like the self-streaming fees and the fees for the camera. So if you're interested in any stickers or t-shirts or calendars, check it out. Also want to thank the 3 engineers who installed the camera, friends and family, especially Steve, my husband, who did the voiceovers. And for the book, the 3 people who did the blurbs for my book, including Amy Tan, who I actually took snake hunting in Colorado. And she read my book and did the blurb for it. I was really proud of that. And all the photographers and the people who read the book and found errors in it and allowed it to be as good as it is. And of course, the publisher, Heyday Books. So for further information, you can find kind of everything all at once at my website, emilytaylorscience.com. It's a hub for everything for our combined outreach with Project RattleCam, research in my lab, the physiological ecologies of reptiles lab, and then all of the work that we do with rattlesnake coexistence in California, which I didn't talk about tonight at Central Coast Snake Services. Do follow us on social media at all of those and stay in touch. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions, and thank you so much for listening.
Emily, thank you so much. Cutting edge science. It's just remarkable.
It really is.
Cameras, hidden cameras everywhere. It's just, or yeah, it's fascinating.
It was that live camera is like it was my dream come true. We worked on it. We wanted to do it for many years. I made it
Uh-huh.
sound easy. It wasn't easy.
No, I'm sure it
We
wasn't.
worked on it for so many years, and when it just exceeded my wildest dreams this year, and I just can't stop smiling about it.
Well, I'm so glad that that was accomplished and has given you such great benefits in terms of viewing and seeing things you never even thought of being able to see. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so let's go see what's in the Q&A section. Um, so Uh, let's see if there's uh, okay. Oh, let's see. Sue is saying something. She had a close encounter with the Mojave Green in the spring hiking in Los Angeles County. It was clearly bothered by people in its territory. Can you comment on how best to deal with Mojave Greens and similar aggressive snakes?
Yeah,
And
thanks for that question. So rattlesnakes in general, are going to be are going to rattle at people and are going to be very upset when they feel threatened. So the rattle evolved as a defensive mechanism to warn predators, including humans, away. It's worth, for perspective, it's worth noting that rattlesnakes evolved in North America about 14 million years ago, and people have only been here for 14,000 years. So we're just newcomers on their turf, and they just see us as a big hairy ape. And they're scared to death of us. So, so rattlesnakes are never actually truly aggressive in the actual definition of that term because they're not going to go after us. They would only ever bite a person in defense, like if we accidentally stepped on one of them, or if some drunk fool was trying to pick them up and handle them, or someone was trying to kill them. So the best thing to do with rattlesnakes is to just be aware of your surroundings, right? If you see a rattlesnake, admire it from a distance, like I do. Wear the proper footwear and pay attention to where you walk. Don't step over things without looking where they are. And if you do startle a rattlesnake, just back away, stay about 10 feet away from a rattlesnake at any time. Mojave rattlesnakes have a bad reputation for being aggressive, but it's merely a reputation. They don't deserve it. Every rattlesnake is going to be defensive like that. And Mojave rattlesnakes are no more defensive than any other rattlesnake. It turns out that individual rattlesnakes have personalities just like people do. Some rattlesnakes are curmudgeons and they get mad and they rattle, and some of them are super mellow. And you only really see that when you get out in the field and you like radio track snakes over and over and over. You can see the same individuals have the same personalities. And so really it's just about awareness and being safe and admiring them from a distance, like I said.
so if you come across a rattlesnake that is a curmudgeon and in a bad mood, how far can it pounce?
Well, they won't. So rattlesnakes don't want to bite people, and they won't bite people unless you get real close to them. So rattlesnakes' strike distance is, you know, the maximum would be about the length of its body, which most rattlesnakes in California are about 3 feet long. Mojave rattlesnakes don't get bigger than 3 feet. So, if you're 10 feet away from rattlesnake, they're not going to try to come at you. You hear lots of stories about snakes chasing people, which is really funny because, well, they don't chase people. And it's really interesting because we have phones on us all the time now. So if a rattlesnake chased somebody, someone would have filmed it by now, and yet there's nothing. Really, if a rattlesnake comes towards a person, it's because the rattlesnake is scared, and the person is standing between the rattlesnake and where it wants to go, like its burrow on the other side or that kind of thing. So our perceptions of these scary animals that come from TV and so on oftentimes will taint what we it'll make us think differently of these animals when really they're just scared.
Hmm. Okay. And there's someone who's saying about that they have a couple of garter snakes, and she says, in my garden, they're too small to eat the gophers, but
Yep.
I worry about whether they might seek cool air or refuge in the gopher tunnels, which I stomp on, the tunnels, not the gopher, or sometimes pour water down. I do not want to hurt the snakes. How likely is it that I could inadvertently harm a snake with seeking refuge in a gopher tunnel?
Yeah, good question. Gopher tunnels are not often used by snakes because as I know all too well, my God, the gophers in my yard. Um, they have big tunnels down underneath, but on top they tend to be more caved in many cases, right? So the snake won't go into those. The snakes are going to be more likely to go into like squirrel burrows and those types of things, which and also even if you're caving in the gopher burrow on top, you're not affecting the deeper parts of those burrows. And so a snake is actually like a garter snake would be good at poking its little snout out to be able to get out and away. So you're fine. That's great that you want to take care of the garter snakes in your yard. In general, if people want to have snakes in their yard, then doing things like providing cover for them, places to hide, is a really good idea. So snakes like to hide under junk, like plywood and tin. And to the extent that you want to put those out in your yard, I don't know, but that's a great way to attract snakes to your yard and to give them a place to hide that may not be a rodent burrow too.
Okay. Um, and Paula is asking if males live solo and the females in a harem. Um, are they out? Are they out when mating, and then the males are on the prowl? How does it work with snakes?
Great question. So all snake species are pretty different, but for the most part, most snakes are largely solitary, which is what makes those snakes in Colorado so interesting. So thinking about the rattlesnakes that you have up there, they tend to be solitary for most of the time. Males, females cruising around by themselves, and mating season happens twice a year. It happens in spring and it happens again in the late summer or early fall. And a male will look for a female, and when he finds her, he's going to hang out with her for a long time because she's usually not into it. And males almost never get to mate with females, so they're desperate. So they'll just hang out and wait and try to make her mate with them. Uh, so that's when you might see two rattlesnakes together, is when a male is like annoyingly hanging around the female. Um, when you see these large aggregations, like in Colorado, that's like I was saying, is going to be more in places where you have really cold winters, or places where there's just the geology is only right in a couple spots for the snakes to get underground. So they all have to go to that spot. And so um, that would probably be true of most snakes. Many of you may have heard about the garter snake den up in Manitoba, Canada, that has tens of thousands of snakes together. That's just like the rattlesnake den in the sense that it's cold up there. They all have to go to kind of one spot. So that's typically how it works. They mostly are solitary, but you see these examples of group living like we see in Colorado.
Well, they must communicate it somehow. I mean, from in these like Manitoba's huge. Colorado's huge, and yet they seem to congregate in a lot of them in one particular spot. So there must be some way of letting each other know that, listen, hey, this is a good spot.
Yeah, well, we think they go back to their natal den. So we think that the baby rattlesnakes return every year to the den that they were born at. Occasionally, some of the babies may go to a different den because there are indeed, multiple of these mega dens in Colorado. Not tons of them, but they are there. But we know that they leave scent trails on the ground. So there's evidence that baby rattlesnakes will follow the scent trail of adult rattlesnakes to find dens. And there's lots of evidence that male rattlesnakes follow the scent trails of sexy female rattlesnakes. What makes a female rattlesnake sexy? Well, it's if she's fat. So male rattlesnakes like fat females because remember how I said that rattlesnakes only give birth every, 2 or 3 years? Because a mother rattlesnake will lose over half her body weight in babies. And it takes her a year or two to gain the weight to be able to support another pregnancy. So if she's a fat mother or she's a fat lady, then he knows that she can get pregnant. So he's going to be all over that. And her pheromones smell different. Her pheromones are different. He can detect fat pheromones, we like to call it, and he'll follow those preferentially. Although, to be honest with you, male rattlesnakes will follow any female's trail because they are so desperate for mating. They'll follow skinny females, fat females more. In fact, we saw on the rattle cam a lot of the male rattlesnakes courting still pregnant females they were trying to mate with. Pretty funny.
Right, desperation. Okay. On the other, but how many young do they have? I mean, it seems as though the females can give birth to quite a few.
Yeah, for sure. It really depends on the species, but in Colorado, we have a lot of good data on that. So it ranges anywhere from 5 to 13 in our population with an average of 8. And those are 8 live pups at the same time. And that's pretty similar for northern Pacific rattlesnakes in your area. Some species of big rattlesnakes, like out in West Texas, the Western diamondback rattlesnakes, may give birth to more like 20 in a litter. So it just depends on the species.
Wow.
And
That's
they
a
live for a long time. So a female rattlesnake lives for decades. So if she gives birth every few years, over the course of her life, she can give birth to, hundreds of pups. And baby rattlesnakes are called pups, just like shark pups are, or, dog pups.
pups it is then. And so is it true that venomous snakes have elliptical eyes, or do snakes have in general elliptical eyes?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not true. So the eye shape or the pupil shape cannot tell you whether a snake is venomous or not. Rattlesnakes are a great example because they oftentimes have a vertical pupil, but at night, the pupil can enlarge just like ours do at night, and it can become round. And furthermore, there are some individuals that just have a fully round pupil all the time. So you can't really use that. And then furthermore, there's some harmless snakes that have a vertical pupil. So it's a little bit more just about their eye anatomy and to some extent whether they're active at night or during the day. Um, most anything, it's interesting. I always tell people, most anything you've heard about rattlesnakes is either a lie or is an exaggeration. There's very few rules that can be applied about rattlesnakes. So it's lots of myths like you have with sharks or with grizzly bears. Any animal that's perceived as dangerous has lots of lore around them. And
Oh, that they do. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the vertical pupil is one of those.
Uh-huh. And so their major food source would be, or can there be a generalized food source for rattlesnakes?
Again, it depends on the species, but most rattlesnakes eat rodents primarily. So the rattlesnakes in where you live love to eat California ground squirrels. They have a complex evolutionary relationship where ground squirrels are actually a little bit resistant to rattlesnakes' venom where they live. That's because they've evolved together right, in an evolutionary arms race.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Uh, so wood rats, kangaroo rats, all kinds of rodents. And then when they're babies, they oftentimes eat lizards to start.
Something smaller.
Yep.
Okay. But not all snakes give live birth either. I mean,
That's true. So most snakes lay eggs, but viviparity or live bearing has evolved independently several times. So all rattlesnakes give live birth, all garter snakes give live birth, all boas, including boa constrictors, and also California natives like rubber boas up where you guys live, those all have live birth. But then other things like gopher snakes, king snakes, night snakes, the thread snakes, those all lay eggs.
and is there any evolutionary advantage of one versus the other?
Yeah, there sure is. So, just like every other evolutionary adaptation, any advantage is going to involve a trade-off, meaning if you evolve an advantage, you also involve a disadvantage. You also evolve a disadvantage. You can't have it all. So viviparity seems to evolve when it's beneficial to protect the developing young by carrying them in your body. So that could be either protecting them from predators. So if you lay eggs, the predators might be able to come and eat all those eggs. But if you keep them in your body, you can hide from the predators and protect them.
Mm.
Or very importantly, temperature wise. So a rattlesnake mother can actually sit under a rock in really hot weather and keep her most of her body cool because she can stick the loop of the body that has all the fetuses into the sun and just warm up that part of her body. We call it cooking her babies. And so she can control their rate of development that way. But of course, this all has a cost. By carrying all these babies in your body, you're carrying around extra weight. It makes you more sluggish, slower to get away from predators. You have a higher cost. It costs you more to move around the environment energetically. So it's a trade-off, and it seems to work really well for certain species.
Mm. And does temperature have anything to do? I gather it does, but I'm not absolutely positive about whether the snakes become male or female.
Not in snakes. So temperature-dependent sex determination is something that happens in all alligators and crocodiles, most turtles, and a few lizards, but no snakes.
Ah, okay.
Hot herpetology, I have some answers.
Yeah, okay, right. All right, let's have a look here and see. This is to age. It says to age a rattlesnake, do you count the rows of rattles?
Yeah, so this is another example of something that's a little bit of a myth, but has a little bit of a grain of truth. So the truth part of it is that a rattlesnake makes a new rattle segment every time it sheds. And some rattlesnakes shed about once a year on average. The problem with it is that they don't always shed once per year, especially when they're young, they often shed more than once per year. And also the rattle string can break. So they're never, when a rattlesnake gets quite old, the rattle's made of keratin, just like our fingernails. So it'll snag on something in the environment, it'll break off. So all you can do is kind of look at the shape of the rattle and tell whether the snake is rather young or rather old. So when a rattlesnake makes its and when it sheds, the new segment that forms at the base of the tail is same width as a snake's tail. So when it's a baby, it makes little rattles. It gets older, each rattles get bigger. So if you see a tapering rattle, it means that just a few years ago that snake was small. So it's a young rattlesnake. But if you see a rattle that's all the same width and then it's broken off, then that snake years ago was the same size. So it's been an adult for a long time. You know it's old.
Ah, it's been around for a while, yes. Yeah, it's not growing anymore. So they shed once, twice, or it's sort of just, I mean, once they stop growing, they still shed.
Yeah, they still shed. So, I mean, to be technically true, snakes don't ever stop growing, but they slow down so much when
Uh,
they're mature. So they shed more when they grow more. So when they're younger, they shed more. If they eat more food, they might shed more than once per year. But on average, it's about once per year.
oh, okay. All right. I know I saw a question. Whoa, where did it go? Here it is. Okay. So we have Bing is asking, do snakes like the red diamond rattlesnake show effects of a disconnected habitat when surrounded by urbanization?
Yeah, they sure do. So there's research going on about this. Um, you know, it's just like anything else, it's really complicated. As urbanization occurs, like there's trade-offs there too. The snakes seem to persist, but we're seeing problems with red diamond rattlesnakes in terms of the fact that they can't like disperse from one of those hills to another one. They're kind of stuck. So what you've made is a bunch of little snake islands. And research has not shown yet for the red diamond rattlesnake, but it has been shown in other types of animals and including some snakes that when they get isolated like that, they can only mate with each other. You end up getting low genetic diversity, which can lead
Yes.
to problems with survival. Um, so I don't know if it's known for red diamond rattlesnakes yet, but it is a possibility of a problem for them for the future.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be a problem. Pathways and and dispersal. That's a problem everywhere. Heavens to Betsy. It's like, how
Sure
do you
is.
get from point A to point B without
Yeah.
getting killed?
Especially if you're a 4 foot rattlesnake.
Uh, uh,
Red diamond rattlesnakes get big, so.
uh, um, someone's asking about proper protocol to care if one gets bitten by a rattlesnake while out hiking.
Yeah, great question. So this is something that we do a lot with Central Coast Snake Services, the stuff I didn't talk about tonight. I do, snake safety training for companies. I, write up personalized medical plans and so on. So I definitely am an expert on this. Um, it's actually really easy to remember what to do because all these things you've heard about, they're all wrong. Like, don't use a tourniquet. Don't cut and suck the venom out. Don't use a snake bite kit to try to suck the venom out. None of that stuff works. It'll all make it worse. Literally, the only thing someone should do is if they're bit on the hand, they should remove any rings because swelling will occur and that could cause a problem with a jewelry stuck or any other constricting jewelry. And then they should call 911 and they should get transported to the hospital. So you should never transport yourself because rattlesnake venom can cause people to be overcome rapidly and they might be driving and drive off the road or kill somebody or themselves. So getting a ambulance, or if you're in a very remote area, a medevac helicopter is a really good idea. And just a quick tip for everyone out there is that back in the day when people used to ask me, well, what if I'm really far away by myself and I have no cell signal? What do I do? My answer
Mm.
used to be, well, you're in trouble. There's nothing you can do. But now most of our modern smartphones actually have a built-in SOS that even without cell signal can get a call for help out. So people should all familiarize themselves, not just for snake bite, but for any emergency in the backcountry about how to get that signal out for help. So don't do anything to the wound, just go to the hospital. And then at the hospital, the physicians will treat you with antivenom, which is very, very good at rescuing life and limb from rattlesnake bite. There's only about 5 deaths from snake bites in the whole country every year. And most of those every year are people who did not seek medical treatment for some reason or another. So snake bites are no longer fatal in most cases. Well, I should go back and say in the past, they were either fatal or if someone did live, which maybe is about half the time or so, they could cause disability, kind of eating away at the tissue,
Mhm.
the finger. But that's all kind of in our past now because of the good treatment that we have here in the US for snake bite.
Now, if you are going into a sort of far out location, sort of outback somewhere where you're by yourself or with a maybe with another person, but are you not able, is this antidote, some antidote, not, are you not able to take some with you, or does it have to be controlled by temperature, or so that you could administer the antidote yourself in a like far out location where there is no one, where you can't get to a hospital quickly?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, you can't do that. Rattlesnake antivenom is not like a shot that you would give. It's actually like in a bag of liquid that is kept in a refrigerator at the hospital, and it has to be administered IV under the
Ah,
careful supervision of a ER physician and toxicologist. So it's not something that people can administer themselves. It's also incredibly expensive. So even if it was something people could carry, they probably wouldn't want to because the chances of getting snake bit are tiny and the cost of the antivenom is astronomical. I should mention that too. Like if people are uninsured or underinsured, a snake bite like will bankrupt you. It's really bad. So that's why I do so much work on prevention of snake bites. Snakes don't want to bite people. A little bit of awareness can go all the way. I tell you, if you just literally don't put your hands and feet where you can't see them, if you wear proper footwear, if you're ever like walking through thick grass or working in thick grass, wear thick, sturdy boots without those little breathable mesh panels in them that are so popular nowadays. And then don't mess with rattlesnakes. If you do those 3 things, you will not get bitten by a snake.
okay. Let's see what else we have. Still have time?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, here we go. Um, Nancy is saying, I remember black racers chasing people in the southeast, but that may just have been someone's perception. They don't chase people, do they? Don't,
Yeah, no, they don't, but
no.
it is perception. And like I said before, a lot of times it can be because the snake is just moving through the environment. And if you startle a snake, you think it's always going to go away from you, and oftentimes it does. But sometimes it's like, oh, I want to get down into my burrow, and the burrow might be behind you. You might be between the snake and the burrow. So it seems like to someone who's really scared that they're being chased. But if you really think about it, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would a snake chase a person? The person's much more scary, right? There's lots of stories about cottonmouths, which are water moccasins, chasing people in the South, but they just don't. Um, again, we've no footage of that, and there's a number of people, like my colleague at Rattlesnake Solutions in Arizona. He has some fun videos on his YouTube where he goes up to cottonmouths to show. He's like, and they're all like, ah, they run away. They're not chasing people; they're scared.
Right. We two-legged creatures. We tend to frighten most other creatures for sure.
Well, it should be. We're the most dangerous animals on the planet for sure.
Yeah. And is it true then that venom, the amount of venom that a viper can inject varies? They can inject a bit or they can inject more,
Yeah,
depending on how frightened they are or depending on how on what.
yeah, that's something that's kind of there's some evidence, some answers, but it's not fully answered yet. It's kind of hard to study. We know of one thing is that adult rattlesnakes inject way more venom than babies. So the myth that bites from baby rattlesnakes are worse than adults is absolutely not true. Baby rattlesnakes can control their venom amount, so they may inject more into a bigger prey, just like an adult rattlesnake would. But bites from adult rattlesnakes are way more severe because they inject more venom. So we don't know whether they're really consciously trying to control the venom, but they certainly can, and it's called venom metering. And the idea is that when they bite, they're not expelling all their venom; they're saving some for later. So a rattlesnake, like if it bit over and over and over, each bite would progressively have slightly less venom, but it wouldn't really truly run out. The only way to make a rattlesnake totally run out of venom is when like venom researchers are milking them and they pick them up and they really squeeze the venom glands to get it all out. Otherwise, there's always going to be a little bit there.
Mm. But it does, I mean, for the snake itself, they to manufacture that venom is rather uh, uh, not just it consumes time, but it consumes a lot of energy. And it doesn't it to produce all of that? I mean, to replenish when
Yeah,
it's
that's
already
a
been taken up by some bites that they've given.
Yeah, so that's a super good question. So rattlesnakes are, are reluctant. They don't want to bite people anyway. They don't want to bite predators. Their venom is for their prey, right? And they want to be able to eat. And so that's what they use it for. So they're reluctant to bite, first of all. And when they do bite a predator like a person, sometimes it's a dry bite. Maybe only 15 or 20% of the time, though, where they bite, but the no venom comes out. Still, most of them are going to be envenomations. And someone did a study to answer the question that you just said about is it energetically costly to make venom? It turns out it's totally negligible energetically to make venom. But the wasting venom on something else could be costly in terms of a lost opportunity. So rattlesnakes are ambush foragers. They sit in one place and wait for a rodent to run by. Oftentimes they sit for weeks or even months before they finally get to strike at a rodent. If they finally get to strike at a rodent and their venom supply is diminished, they might miss the opportunity to eat that rodent, and that could be a huge difference for them. Because some rattlesnakes can get by fine on just a handful of meals a year. So that's the real cost of wasting their venom.
Uh-huh. Okay. We seem to be gathering more and more. Ah, okay, let's see. Ah, well, here's a question. Have you ever been bitten?
Yes, and actually I was going to show you this. You might not be able to see it because I'm blurry, but I don't know if you can see this or not. But this is a pickle jar of a Western diamondback rattlesnake. It was a study animal in my PhD project that I was handling him, and I was bitten. This is 22 years ago. I didn't kill him in revenge. He died of natural causes, and I pickled him. But that was when I was in the lab handling rattlesnakes all day long, and I, got a little bit like too used to it. And so that was a big wake-up call. And in fact, that was part of what motivated me to develop methods for snake safety and to teach these snake safety classes, is because the way I was taught was a little bit more lax. And I now have developed ways that for my students, we're really hands off, keeping our body parts away from those snakes.
Hmm. Okay, so maybe we can go to, let's see, we'll get one more or whatever. And okay, so here's a question about how you and your colleagues handle snakes for research, to collect research data, how you capture them, and what processes do to get the data? How do you mark them for surveillance or tracking purposes other than obviously through cameras?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, obviously the rattle cam is completely hands off. We don't go there. We don't touch those animals. We're tracking individuals by their unique color patterns on their back, which not color patterns, but markings on their back, which are identified by community scientists like you. But when we're doing other studies where we actually are handling the snakes, so we capture snakes using tongs, so like these long grabbers, and we can put them into buckets. And then if we need to actually get our hands on the snakes to collect a blood sample or to put the paint on the rattle, then there's these things called rattlesnake tubes. And there are these long plastic tubes that come in a series of sizes. And you kind of just, the snake is on the ground, you're holding it with the tongs, and you kind of coax it to crawl up this plastic tube. And when it's halfway up, you grab where its body meets the plastic, and you can pick it up, and its head is stuck up inside this clear plastic tube. So it can't bite or anything. And then you can hold it and you can take measurements on it. You can weigh it. You can do all those things that way.
Oh,
And then for marking, like I said, we can give them like a unique paint code by injecting acrylic paint into their rattle, and that will be permanent until the rattle falls off. And then if we're really wanting to mark them for long term, we can put a pit tag in them, which is the same thing as the tags that you have put into your pets in case your dog gets lost. And so we scan them with a little reader to be able to tell who's who from year to year.
fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, well, we all have to thank you for joining us, and we've got to give you a break. And otherwise, we can keep going, I think, all evening with questions and comments and so on and so forth. So, Emily, thank you so much for joining us,
You're welcome. Thank you
and
for having me.
oh, and for taking so many questions and for staying as long as you did. Thank you again. That was absolutely remarkable.
Glad you enjoyed it, and thanks for coming, folks, and thanks for caring about snakes.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Take care
All right,
then.
thank you.
Thank you. Good night. All right. So stop the recording.